Now, General, if I can switch to the battles that you recount in Call Sign Chaos with a context that's modern. As soon as I had finished Call Sign Chaos, which is an instant classic in my view, I read Henry Kissinger's On China for a second time because I think they are the American competitor for the next 100, if not 200 years. Are the lessons so hard earned in the first Gulf War, in Afghanistan, in the Iraq War, and now in the War on Terror? Are they applicable to the competition we are in with the People's Republic of China?
Well, they are applicable. However, every conflict, every competition, every adversary, every competitor is unique. So you can't copy them like a template. What you have to do is you have to adapt the lessons that you learned there to the specific situation. And that's why the study of history is so important to leaders, because the study of history will not, in and of itself, give you a roadmap or a plan to be copied. What history will often do is just light that dark path ahead, because there's no other way to light it, really, and tell you what questions to ask, because you'll see how other people successfully or unsuccessfully dealt with a similar situation. For example, there's a model in the 3rd century AD of how the Roman Empire dealt with challenging times, where they were having challenging fiscal times, their military was challenged, their diplomats were not respected, and they came through. There were also examples of that under the Sun King in France in the 1700s. And our own country has been through tough times from the Civil War to World War II. So you adapt these lessons learned to the specific circumstance, but there's a great deal of value to studying history, and there's a great deal of danger to ignoring history.
One of the things I studied carefully was your setup of Forward Operating Base Rhino, the largest expeditionary force the United States has ever sent. Was that what you sent from Task Force 78 into the middle of Afghanistan, which has no coast, of course? And then I began to think about China. I don't know that we could ever use an expeditionary force under any circumstance against the People's Republic of China because it is so vast, General Mattis. Am I ignoring the idea that there's always something new under the sun if you use the best from the old books?
Well, I think it was the deepest penetrating amphibious assault in history going into Afghanistan. However, what you have to do is look at the theme of what happened there. How do you penetrate? One point would be expeditionary bases alongside our allies around China would certainly complicate any kind of conflict from China's point of view. It would also strengthen our allies and let them know that we are with them. That would allow diplomats perhaps to help deter a war. We don't want to just deter a great power war. We want great power peace. And part of this is going back to your earlier question, Hugh, about allies. If you have allies, and if they are representative democracies, for example, then by their very existence nearby China, the young people in the streets of Hong Kong today are emboldened. The democracy of Taiwan is strengthened by those other examples around them. So you don't look at the amphibious invasion into Afghanistan right after 9/11 as only a military approach. There are also diplomatic approaches. There are approaches that use information warfare. The penetration may very well be just to show the Chinese people that they deserve a government that does not violate international norms, that they stand to benefit economically, culturally, as a nation, if they have leadership that listens to the international community, that none of us can go our own way alone in this world. Globalization is not a policy. Globalization's a reality, and China has to deal with that reality as well. So I would move the military example of Afghanistan up to a higher level, perhaps, Hugh, of diplomacy and how we do economic relations, that sort of thing.
Governor, General Mattis, last week I had a conversation with a very senior retired American diplomat whom everybody respects, who was warning that America has to be very careful not to over-encourage the Hong Kong demonstrators. Tiananmen Square is a bit of history, and President Xi is not going to allow Hong Kong to become an independent state. As you reflect on that, what's your advice to Americans talking about Hong Kong, about how we do it to both stand with that which we believe in, freedom, but not over-encourage what is essentially a defenseless force in the face of a very strong PLA massing on its border?
Yeah, well, it's a good point. This is not something that we are going to intervene in militarily. And so that's why that diplomat probably said we would not want to over-encourage. I think the number one thing we do in a situation like this is make certain our own example here in the United States shows how people govern, shows how people come to compromise, how we understand one another. And this is an area we've got our own problems with right now. But we need to show that democracy is a functioning way to govern, not just to have elections, but after we have elections, that we actually roll up our sleeves and work together to solve problems. And this is a challenge right now, and it's a challenge in France. We can see the challenge in the United Kingdom, and certainly here at home. We have got to find a way to, most of all, give the example of a functioning democracy that's based on respect for everyone's views, that we listen to one another, and then that we act in concert with compromise in order to carry forward the best ideas. And I think that our example is what would be most invaluable to the people in the streets of Hong Kong. We are not going to convince them not to stand up for their own freedom. They obviously have been in the streets for a while, and they've proven that they will stand up for the freedoms they believe they deserve. And remember, Hugh, this is not just an internal problem for China. Remember that back in I think it was in the 1980s, when China came to us for our support for the return of Hong Kong from British control, a vestige of the colonial times, to China. And they promised us at that time it would be one country but two systems. And these problems that we're seeing today, where the people are upset in Hong Kong, stem from a very ill-advised law they tried to force on Hong Kong, which was extradition. In other words, it would not have been two systems. And they gave us their word there would be one country, two systems. They gave the people of Hong Kong their word it would be two systems. And when they start to violate that, we shouldn't be surprised if the people of Hong Kong take umbrage at it and go into the streets. But at the same time, I don't think we should be half-stepping that we believe in democracy and we believe countries should live up to their word when they give it.
Now, General Mattis, staying on this theme, you write at length in Call Sign Chaos about you reaping the benefits of people who planned on sea lift capacity a generation before you got your stars when you invaded Afghanistan. And right now, the new National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, is a huge proponent of President Trump's plan for a 355-ship Navy. I think one of the advantages of Call Sign Chaos is you drive home 25 years from now, the next Mattis is going to be fighting with whatever we provide today. I'm not sure our Congress is that forward-looking anymore.
Well, we do seem to watch in Washington, D.C. as they're consumed by near-term and immediate issues, perhaps a real lack of nonpartisanship when we face certain challenges. But remember, last December, 87% of the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, voted for the highest military budget in terms of raw dollars that we've had. So I believe there is a degree of bipartisanship or nonpartisanship when it comes to defense. We are going to see a more naval or maritime strategy as our military strategy. I think this is simply a reality as we deal with the changing world. So we must watch closely the size of the U.S. Navy and make certain that our naval forces are equipped to be the lead element. Of course, we need the Army, the Air Force, the Marines there as part of a joint effort. But we will have to watch and make certain that what we're turning over is a military capable of protecting this experiment we call America 20 years from now, because we can't be in a position where we think 3.1 or 3.6%, if you include the Veterans Administration, is exorbitant in terms of defense. We can afford survival in America. We also have to make sure our allies are doing their fair share, and that's where we have a continuing effort by the Trump administration to try to take countries like Korea or Western Europe that were admittedly bombed flat in World War II or on their backs economically. They're no longer on their backs, and all the democracies have to pitch in. We can't just say the American taxpayer is going to pay this bill. All the democracies are going to have to work together for their own common defense. But I think we can afford it, and I would just say that the Congress can be persuaded if we have a good strategic argument. I wouldn't say that the fringe elements of either party can be, but certainly the bulk of the Congress can be persuaded if we have a sound strategy that makes sense to the American Congress, the American people.
Let's conclude our conversation about call sign chaos, General, by talking about the Battle of Fallujah. Specifically, you warn again and again that Washington, D.C. decision makers cannot presume to know what's going on a battlefield, no matter how refined the modern tools of communication, no matter how close it appears on the computer screen, they're not there. And the Battle of Fallujah, the first Battle of Fallujah, may be the most frustrated you are in call sign chaos. Can you explain why and how the aura of omniscience back in Washington, D.C., or in this case, Coalition Provisional Headquarters, led to what was a very bad result in the first Battle of Fallujah?
Well, what happened in Fallujah was that we had some civilian contractors who got basically into an area they shouldn't have been in. They were killed, 4 of them. Their bodies desecrated, burned, and hung from bridges. We knew in Fallujah that it was a tribal town, so we would be able to find members of tribes that disagreed with what had happened, disagreed vehemently. We would recover the bodies, return them to their loved ones, but we also had photographs, and we had our spies in the town who could guide us to hunt down the guys who had done it and take them out. I did not want to do a full-scale assault on the town because we were under troop caps at this time. I did not have enough troops to do it right, to seal off the town. Eventually I was ordered to go in. We had to evacuate the people. And I said, okay, those are the orders. I got it. I knew that my military chain of command had recommended we allow the operation to proceed as I recommended. Instead, I was ordered to go in, and I said, okay, let's get on with it. Those are the orders. They're not called likes. They're called orders. I didn't have to like it. But the bottom line was I said, but don't stop me. Once we start into that city, don't stop me. So we got over 300,000 people out of the city. The terrorists were numerous. We were attacking in the city. And deep inside the city, due to a lot of public releases of information, some of it true, much of it untrue, by the adversary. Basically, politically, we were stopped, even though I had the support 2-3 levels above me in the military chain of command. We were stopped deep inside the city. I was ordered to negotiate with the adversaries there, the ones who represented them anyway. They weren't the terrorists themselves. They were their minions. And then eventually I was ordered out of the city. We warned at that time we'll have to go back in, but we handed a moral victory to the enemy, who then their recruiting, their fundraising picked up, and it was a real setback. And as my troops were being withdrawn, I remember one young lad being filthy dirty, being interviewed about how terrible this was, that they'd lost their buddies. They were being forced to fall back, and they must feel terrible. And he just looks calmly into the camera, and he says, it doesn't matter, we'll hunt them down somewhere else and kill them. And that's an example of what happens when the troops keep faith with you. They knew we'd fought not to do this, and they did not take it in a way that they would lower their morale. I was amazed at how they kept faith with us. But unfortunately, Hugh, we did have to go back in months after I'd left Iraq, and we took hundreds of killed and wounded in order to take the city. And now the terrorists had had time to really prepare, to stockpile ammunition, to build bunkers inside houses. So yes, it was a very frustrating time, and I think it's a reminder that policymakers have to set an achievable end state, and then once you make the commitment to go into a fight, you cannot stop halfway. You can't go wobbly at that point. You've got to finish it as quickly as possible on your own terms.
If you're going to take Vienna, take Vienna. You don't use the PG-13 of Napoleon in Call Sign Chaos. Very last question, General. Is my business, journalism, are we up to the task of cooperating without being compromised with military campaigns, because we're in the business of getting clicks and stories read that sometimes works to the great disadvantage of people whose lives are on the line? Do you see us reconciling that tension?
I do not. I accept that under our Constitution, the press, to do its job, does not even need to be fair or accurate. I accept that, although I think many people in the responsible press, and I find them across the political spectrum, there's representatives of responsible press, they do try to get it right. And there are some that actually have been aware of classified information and have not printed it in a manner that would cost us casualties. But the press is so amorphous now. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what we need to do as members of the government is make certain that we're working with the responsible members, even when they're reporting something that's uncomfortable for us, and do our best to keep them close so that they get full transparency, at least to the degree we can. There are some things you simply have to classify or will fail. A raid to capture, kill bin Laden. We could not announce that in advance, and nobody would have expected us to. But there are many people in the press, I think, who, if they had heard about it, would not have announced it. But there are others who, you're right, they would have. So the press manifests itself one person, one man, one woman at a time, and people should have to live with their reputations as far as I'm concerned. And I'll do my best to always open doors to members of the press. I did so when I was on active duty. I remember with the 1st Marine Division and 23,000 troops, I had over 100 members of the press embedded among them. I was that confident that what they would see would be heartening for the American people and the global audience. So it's got the good, the bad, and the ugly, just like every human organization, Hugh.
Well, Call Sign Chaos recounts a lot of good, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the book. General Mattis, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you. Congratulations on a bestseller, and thank you for your service to the country over, 5 decades.
Hey, thanks very much, Hugh. It's good talking with you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.